The Great Hall on Zarian Prime had never been so full. Representatives from 847 different species filled the massive chamber. Some floated in gravity fields, others breathed different gases through special masks, and many had body shapes that seemed impossible. But they all came here for one reason: the millennial gathering of the Galactic Council. Elder Vexhai moved slowly to the center platform. Her crystal body caught the light from 3 suns throwing rainbow patterns across the walls. She was old, older than most civilizations. She had seen species rise and fall like waves on an ocean. Today, she felt the weight of every one of her countless years. The younger council members whispered among themselves. They thought she was just a relic, a living museum piece who remembered things that no longer mattered. They were wrong. She remembered things that mattered more than anything else. "My fellow beings," Vexhai began, her voice like wind through ancient stones. "I come before you today with a warning. A new species has joined the stars. They call themselves humans." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Counselor Drex of the Ado hegemony slammed his armored fist on his speaking podium. "We know of these humans, old one. They barely crawled out of their own star system last month. They have no shields, no plasma weapons, no quantum drives. Their ships are made of metal and combustion engines. Metal, like something from the Dark Ages." More laughter. Even the peaceful Zalani were smiling behind their breathing apparatus. The Corvan hive mind buzzed with shared amusement. How could such a primitive species be a threat to anyone? Vexhai waited for the noise to die down. She had expected this reaction. The young always thought they knew everything. "I have seen their kind before," she said quietly. "Not humans exactly, but species like them. Species with the same nature." She touched a control panel with one crystal finger. The air above the platform shimmered, and suddenly everyone could see what she saw. Ancient data cores floated in the holographic display, information storage devices older than most of the civilizations, in the room. "These records come from the Valix Empire," Vexhai explained. "They ruled 12,000 star systems 3 million years ago. They encountered a species much like humans. Bipedal mammals with no special powers, no telepathy, no energy manipulation, no hive consciousness, just individual beings with basic technology." The image changed. Now they could see star charts, battle reports, and something that looked like surrender documents. The Valix thought these mammals would be easy to control. They offered them the usual choice: submit or be destroyed. The mammals chose a third option. They chose to fight, not just fight, they chose to win. Counselor Jara of the Trading Guilds leaned forward. Her 4 eyes blinked in sequence. "Surely you exaggerate, Elder. No primitive species can defeat an advanced galactic empire." "The Valix Empire fell in 200 years, Vexhai replied. "Not to invasion, not to conquest. They fell because they could not adapt fast enough. These mammals learned everything the Valix knew, then improved it. When the Valix developed new weapons, the mammals made better ones. When the Valix created new defenses, the mammals found ways through them. The hologram showed more records. Now, different civilizations, different time periods, but always the same pattern. Peaceful first contact, misunderstanding, conflict, and then change. Sometimes the advanced civilizations learned to coexist. Sometimes they didn't survive the experience. Each time, the story was the same," Vexhai continued. "These mammalian species shared certain traits. They were curious about everything. They never accepted that something was impossible. When faced with a problem, they did not give up. They found a way around it, through it, or over it. Most importantly, they learned from everything and everyone." Young Counselor Tybex of the Crystal Worlds spoke up. His voice tinkled like breaking glass. "Even if this is true, Elder, what makes you think these humans are the same? Perhaps they are different from these ancient species." Vexhai's crystal form grew brighter, a sign that she was accessing deep memories. "I have been monitoring their transmissions since they achieved spaceflight. Listen to what they say about themselves." New holograms appeared. These showed human history, their wars, their explorations, their disasters and triumphs. The Council, watched in growing amazement as they saw humans survive ice ages, plagues, and countless wars. They saw humans climb the highest mountains for no reason except to say they had done it. They watched humans dive to the deepest ocean trenches just to see what was there. They have a saying, HFY said. Failure is not an option. Another one. Where there's a will, there's a way. And my personal favorite, hold my beer and watch this. The crystal being paused, letting that sink in. This last phrase is usually spoken just before a human attempts something that should be impossible. And then, they do it. Counselor Drek snorted through his breathing slits. Primitive sayings from a primitive species. We have conquered 47 worlds, Elder. We know how to deal with lesser beings. The Valaks had conquered 4,000 worlds, HFY replied calmly. The Nethek Dominion had enslaved entire galactic sectors. The Primarch Collective had technology that could reshape planets. All of them fell to species with the same basic nature as these humans. She called up one final hologram. This one showed a human space station, one of their first attempts at living in space. It was ugly by galactic standards, all sharp angles and exposed machinery, but it worked. More than that, it was already being improved and expanded by its creators. Look at how they build, HFY said. Not for beauty, not for showing power. They build for function. When something breaks, they fix it. When something could work better, they make it better. They never stop improving, never stop learning. The hall fell silent. Even the most arrogant council members were starting to understand what the elder was trying to tell them. What are you asking us to do? Asked Counselor Vara of the peaceful meditation worlds. Her mental tendrils swayed gently as she spoke. Treat them as equals from the beginning, HFY said urgently. Do not try to conquer them or control them. Do not underestimate them. Most importantly, do not threaten them or their friends. These humans have something that makes them incredibly dangerous when provoked. And what is that? Drex asked, though his tone was less mocking now. HFY's crystal body pulsed with light as she delivered her final warning. They have hope. Not just hope for themselves, but hope for everyone. They believe things can always get better, that any problem can be solved, that any injustice can be corrected. When you threaten hope itself, humans do not despair. They get angry, and angry humans are the most dangerous force in the universe. The elder stepped back from the speaking platform. Mark my words, fellow counselors. These humans will change everything. The only question is whether we will be wise enough to change with them, or stubborn enough to stand in their way. As the council session ended and representatives returned to their home worlds, most dismissed the old crystal being's warnings as the fearful ramblings of an ancient mind. They filed her testimony in their archives and forgot about it. Only a few, the oldest and wisest among them, sent urgent messages to their home governments. They had learned to listen when Elder HFY spoke of danger. She had been right too many times before, but their warnings, like hers, were largely ignored. After all, how much trouble could one small species of primitive mammals possibly cause? They would find out soon enough. Ambassador Thylan stood on the command deck of the warship Dominator, watching the edge of human space through the main viewing screen. Behind him, 49 other hegemony dreadnoughts waited in perfect formation. Each ship could destroy a HFY planet. Together, they represented enough firepower to conquer most star systems in a single day. This should be simple. Every species they had ever encountered followed the same pattern. The hegemony fleet would arrive, demonstrate their overwhelming power, and the new species would either surrender immediately or fight a brief, hopeless war before surrendering. Then came the integration process. Useful technology and individuals were absorbed into the hegemony, and the rest became workers and soldiers. Thylan's armor clicked as he moved. He was bred for war, like all hegemony officers. His people had been conquering other species for so long that peaceful interaction was almost unknown to them. Diplomacy, in hegemony terms, meant choosing between quick surrender and slow destruction. Contact on sensors, reported Navigation Officer Kells. Single vessel moving to intercept. Thylan's mandibles clicked with amusement. One ship against 50? These humans were even more primitive than intelligence had suggested. "Show me." The human vessel appeared on screen. Thylan stared at it in confusion. It was tiny compared to their dreadnoughts, and it looked wrong. Where hegemony ships were smooth and elegant, this thing was all angles and exposed machinery. It looked like someone had built it in their garage. "Sir," Communications Officer Rendeck said, his voice uncertain, "we're receiving a transmission from the human vessel." "Put it through," Thylan ordered. "Let's hear their surrender." The screen changed to show the interior of the human ship. A female human sat in what appeared to be their command center. She had dark hair and was wearing some kind of uniform. Most surprisingly, she was smiling. "Hello there," the human said cheerfully. "I'm Captain Sarah Chen of the exploration vessel Endeavor. Welcome to human space. We've been hoping someone would show up. We have so many questions." Thylan blinked all four eyes. This was not the response he had expected. Where was the fear? The desperate attempts to negotiate, the begging for mercy? "I am Ambassador Thylan of the Hegemony," he said formally. "You will surrender your vessel and prepare to be boarded. Resistance will result in your destruction." Captain Chen's smile got even bigger. "Oh, you want to come aboard? That's fantastic. We'd love to have you. Dr. Webb is going to be so excited. He's our xenobiologist and he's been dying to meet actual aliens. Can you breathe our atmosphere, or should we prepare special accommodations?" This was definitely not going according to protocol. Thylan looked around his command deck. His officers were staring at the screen with the same confusion he felt. In 300 years of conquest, they had never encountered a reaction like this. You are inviting us aboard your vessel?" Thylan asked slowly. "Of course. We've prepared one of our cargo bays for first contact." "Well, we hoped we had prepared it right. We've never done this before. We've got translation equipment set up, cultural exchange materials, and Dr. Webb has about 10,000 questions ready. Oh, and coffee. Do you drink coffee? We weren't sure what you might like, so we prepared several different beverages." Thylan's communication officer muted the transmission and leaned over. "Sir, this could be a trap." "What kind of trap invites the enemy aboard for coffee?" Thylan muttered. He reopened the channel. "Very well. A small delegation will board your vessel." "Wonderful. We'll meet you in cargo bay 2. Just follow the flashing lights when you dock." An hour later, Thylan and 5 of his officers stood in the human cargo bay. It had been hastily converted into a meeting space with tables, chairs that looked like they had been built to accommodate different body types, and several machines that were apparently making hot beverages. Dr. Marcus Webb rushed over to greet them. He was a tall, thin human with gray hair and the most excited expression Thylan had ever seen on any being. "Ambassador Thylan, it's such an honor to meet you," Dr. Webb said, practically bouncing on his feet. "I have to ask, your armor, is it grown or manufactured? The biomechanical integration is fascinating. And your mandibles, are they primarily for communication, or do they serve other functions? Oh, and how many genders does your species have?" "We've been debating that question for weeks." Thylan was beginning to understand why Elder Vexhai had been concerned. Captain Chen appeared with a steaming cup. "Coffee for the ambassador? Or we have tea, hot chocolate, or something Dr. Webb invented, that he swears tastes like cinnamon, but I'm not convinced." "I do not require sustenance at this time," Thylan said carefully. "No problem at all," Chen said. "So, what brings you to our neighborhood? Are you explorers too? Traders? We're always interested in learning about new cultures and technologies." "Security." Chief Vorth leaned over to whisper in Thylan's ear. "Sir, I've been scanning their ship. Their technology is incredibly primitive, but what? But it works in ways our computers can't predict. Their power systems should be impossible. They're running 3 different incompatible energy sources through the same distribution network. It should have exploded the moment they turned it on." Thylan looked around the cargo bay with new eyes. Now that Vorth mentioned it, he could see what the security chief meant. Everything looked like it had been built by different people with different ideas, then somehow made to work together. Cables were held in place with what appeared to be metallic tape. A ventilation system was clearly jury-rigged from parts meant for something else entirely. "How long have you had faster-than-light travel?" Thailand asked. "Oh, about 8 months now," Dr. Webb said proudly. "It took us a while to figure out how to make the math work with our existing technology. We had to invent 17 new alloys and completely redesign our power systems 3 times. 8 months? Thailand's voice cracked slightly. You developed FTL travel in 8 months? Well, we had the theoretical framework for years, Captain Chen explained. We just couldn't build the technology to make it work. But then the Peterson drive became practical, and everything fell into place. Dr. Webb here figured out how to adapt it to work with our fusion reactors. It was really a team effort, Dr. Webb said modestly. Though I admit, the breakthrough came when we stopped trying to make it perfect and started focusing on making it work. Humans are really good at making things work. Thailand was starting to feel the first stirrings of something he had never experienced before: uncertainty about the outcome of a conquest. Over the next several hours, the hegemony officers were given a tour of the human ship. What they saw defied everything they knew about technology and engineering. The humans had taken basic scientific principles and pushed them far beyond what should have been possible. When Dr. Webb showed them the FTL drive, Thailand's chief engineer nearly fainted. "This shouldn't work," Engineer Kules muttered, staring at the human drive system. "The power fluctuations alone should tear the ship apart." "Oh, it did the first few times," Dr. Webb said cheerfully. "We lost 3 prototype ships before we figured out how to stabilize it. But that's how we learn, right? Try, fail, improve, try again." "You lost 3 ships and kept trying?" Vorth asked. "Of course, Captain," Chen said, looking surprised by the question. "The crew knew the risks. They volunteered anyway. That's what humans do. We keep trying until we get it right." As the delegation prepared to return to their ship, Thailand realized that everything Elder Vexhai had said was true. These humans were not like any other species the hegemony had encountered. They didn't seem to understand the concept of accepting limitations. "Captain Chen," Thailand said formally, "the hegemony would like to offer you a place in our empire. You would be granted protected status in exchange for sharing your technology and providing military service when required." Chen and Dr. Webb exchanged glances. "That's very kind of you," Chen said, "but we prefer to remain independent. We're happy to trade with you, though. Share knowledge, maybe establish cultural exchange programs. We have some innovations you might find interesting." Thailand felt his world shift slightly. No species had ever refused hegemony protection before. "I should inform you that refusal of our offer typically results in more direct negotiations." "Are you threatening us?" Chen asked. Her voice was still friendly, but Thailand noticed that several human crew members had suddenly appeared nearby. They weren't armed, but there was something in their posture that made his security chief tense. "I am merely explaining the usual process," Thailand said. "Well," Dr. Webb said, his excitement undimmed, "I guess we'll deal with that when it happens. Humans are pretty good at adapting to new situations. But hey, before you go, would you mind answering just a few more questions? I'm particularly curious about your faster-than-light communication systems." As Thailand and his officers returned to their ship, the ambassador realized he had a problem. The usual protocols clearly weren't going to work with these humans. They seemed genuinely friendly and eager to cooperate, but they also seemed completely unafraid of the most powerful military force in the galaxy. Worse, their primitive technology was somehow more advanced than hegemony science in several key areas. If they could develop FTL travel in 8 months, what could they do with more time and resources? High Admiral Kravex read Ambassador Thailand's report for the 3rd time. The words didn't make any more sense than they had the first 2 times. A species that refused hegemony protection? That invited potential conquerors aboard for coffee and cultural exchange? It was unprecedented. "Sir," his aide said quietly, "Command is waiting for your response." Kravex set down the datapad and looked out at the stars. In his 40 years of service, he had never encountered a situation like this. The protocols were clear. Species that refused hegemony protection were given a demonstration of force. A single orbital bombardment of a minor target usually convinced them to reconsider. "Prepare the fourth battle group," he ordered. "We'll give these humans a gentle reminder of the consequences of defying the hegemony." 3 weeks later, Admiral Kravex's ships hung in space above New Geneva, a small human mining colony on the edge of their territory. The colony had 12,000 inhabitants and minimal defenses. It was perfect for a demonstration. "Open a channel to the colony," Kravex ordered. The main screen showed a middle-aged human man in work clothes. Behind him, Kravex could see what appeared to be a mining operation. "This is Colony Administrator Harrison," the man said calmly. "How can I help you?" "I am High Admiral Kravex of the Hegemony 4th Battle Group," Kravex announced formally. "Your species has refused our offer of protection. We are here to demonstrate the consequences of that refusal. You have 1 hour to evacuate non-essential personnel." Harrison blinked slowly. "Are you saying you're going to attack us because we don't want to join your empire?" "We are providing a demonstration of hegemony power," Kravex replied. "This will help your leaders understand the benefits of cooperation." "I see," Harrison said. There was a long pause. "Well, we can't evacuate 12,000 people in an hour. Most of our transport ships are out on supply runs. If you're determined to do this, we'll just have to weather it as best we can." Kravex felt a flicker of unease. Where were the pleas for mercy? The desperate attempts to negotiate? Harrison was speaking like he was discussing the weather. "You do not seem to understand the gravity of your situation," Kravex said. "Oh, I understand perfectly," Harrison replied. "You're going to blow up our colony to scare Earth into surrendering. It's a pretty standard intimidation tactic. We learned about it in school when we studied historical Earth empires." The Admiral was becoming frustrated. "This is not a historical exercise. This is your final warning." "Noted," Harrison said. "Do what you feel you have to do. We'll do what we have to do." The transmission ended. Kravex stared at the blank screen for a long moment, then gave the order to commence bombardment. The plasma beams hit New Geneva's main settlement with devastating effect. Buildings collapsed, power grids failed, and smoke rose from the ruins. It was a textbook demonstration of overwhelming force. What happened next was not textbook at all. Within hours, every major human news network was broadcasting footage of the attack. But instead of calls for surrender, the broadcasts showed something else entirely. Rescue workers were already digging through the rubble. Medical teams were treating the wounded. Engineers were restoring power to critical systems. More importantly, other humans were already studying the wreckage of hegemony weapons that had failed to detonate properly. Dr. Elizabeth Chen, Captain Chen's sister and a specialist in exotic energy systems, led a team of scientists to the bombardment site. They collected every piece of hegemony technology they could find, from weapon fragments to pieces of armor that had fallen from damaged ships. "Look at this," Dr. Chen said, holding up a plasma conduit. "The energy focusing system is elegant, but it's incredibly inefficient. They're losing 60% of their power to heat dispersion." "The targeting computers are interesting," added Dr. Park, the team's systems specialist. "Quantum-based, very sophisticated, but they're designed to work with specific ship configurations, very inflexible." Within 3 months, human engineers had not only reverse-engineered hegemony weapons technology, they had improved it. The first human plasma cannons were uglier than their hegemony counterparts, built from salvaged mining equipment and fusion reactor components. But they were also 30% more efficient and could be mounted on virtually any spacecraft. "Admiral," Kravex watched the intelligence reports with growing alarm. Instead of surrendering, the humans had used his demonstration of force as a learning opportunity. Their ship production had increased dramatically. More disturbing, their ships were now armed with weapons that should have taken decades to develop. "Sir," his intelligence officer reported, "the humans have established something called the Terran Defense Force. They're organizing their military fleet." "How many ships?" Kravex asked. "Approximately 3,000 vessels of various classes." Kravex nearly choked. 3,000? How is that possible? "They've converted civilian vessels, sir. Cargo ships, mining platforms. even passenger transports. They're turning everything that can mount a weapon into a warship. The admiral studied the tactical displays. The human ships looked like a child's drawing of a space fleet, all different sizes and shapes, clearly built by different groups with different ideas. But intelligence suggested they were surprisingly effective. Prepare the second and third. Battle groups, Kravex ordered. We're going to finish this before it gets out of hand. The Battle of Kepler Station was the hegemony's first real taste of human military doctrine. Kravex had expected a conventional engagement, two fleets meeting in open space, exchanging fire until one side retreated or was destroyed. Instead, the humans fought like no species the hegemony had ever encountered. They didn't form neat battle lines. Their ships attacked from all directions, often in groups too small to be considered proper formations. They used ramming attacks, turning damaged ships into missiles aimed at hegemony vessels. They deployed mines in impossible patterns that seemed to anticipate hegemony movements. Most disturbing of all, they seemed to be enjoying themselves. Admiral, Communications Officer Veld reported, "We're picking up human radio chatter." "Put it through." The bridge speakers filled with human voices. "This is Charlie 7. I've got a clean shot at their command ship." "Roger that, Charlie 7. Remember, aim for the weapon ports like Dr. Chen showed us." "Copy." "Hey, watch this." The transmission was followed by the sound of weapons fire and then excited whooping. "Did he just say watch this?" Kravex asked in disbelief. "Yes, sir." Intelligence suggests it's a common human phrase usually spoken before attempting something dangerous or impossible. A proximity alarm sounded. On the tactical display, a small human vessel was approaching the Dominion at maximum speed. "They're going to ram us," the tactical officer reported. "Impossible. They'd have to know it's suicide." "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from that ship." "This is the freighter Lucky Strike," a cheerful human voice announced. "We've got a delivery. For you. Don't worry about signing for it." The ship hit the Dominion shields at full speed. The explosion crippled two hegemony destroyers and damaged the flagship's main weapons array. The human ship was completely destroyed, but the transmission kept coming. "Yee-haw! Did you see that, Martha? I got both of them." Kravex realized with growing horror that the human pilot had somehow survived long enough to celebrate his successful ramming attack. The battle continued for 18 hours. When it ended, the hegemony had technically won. They controlled the battlefield and the humans had withdrawn. But Kravex had lost more ships in one engagement than in his previous 5 campaigns combined. Worse, the humans had broadcast the entire battle on their communication networks. Instead of being demoralized by their losses, they seemed to be studying every moment of the engagement. They were learning from their defeats, adapting their tactics, and improving their technology at an impossible rate. That night, Admiral Kravex sent an urgent message to Hegemony High Command. For the first time in his career, he recommended a strategic withdrawal, not because the hegemony couldn't win, they had superior numbers and technology, but because he was beginning to realize that victory against humans might cost more than defeat. On Earth, the Terran Council met in emergency session. The images from New Geneva and Kepler Station had united humanity in a way that nothing else could have. The attack on civilians had made it personal. President Martinez addressed the Global Assembly. They wanted to show us what happens when we refuse to surrender. Instead, they've shown us something else. They've shown us that we can fight back, that we can adapt, that we can win. The cheers that erupted from the assembly hall could be heard around the world. Elder Vexhai watched the news broadcast from her crystal sanctuary on Xerion Prime. Everything was unfolding exactly as she had predicted. The hegemony had made the classic mistake. They had threatened human hope itself. She sent one final message to the Galactic Council. It has begun. May whatever gods you believe in have mercy on us all. News of the human resistance spread across the galaxy faster than any fleet could travel. In the great trading posts and communication hubs, beings from hundreds of species gathered around news displays, watching footage of impossible battles and improbable victories. The Zilani Engineer Guild was holding their monthly technical symposium when the reports arrived. Master Engineer Thylix watched a human ship defeat 3 hegemony cruisers using what appeared to be mining equipment and sheer audacity. Impossible, muttered Senior Engineer Vorthak. Their power-to-mass ratios are completely wrong. Those weapons should not work. Thylak studied the tactical readouts more carefully. Look at the energy distribution patterns. They're not using our conventional wisdom at all. They're treating their ships like modular construction projects. The footage showed human crews rapidly reconfiguring their weapons mid-battle, swapping out damaged components with spare parts in ways that should have been impossible. A human destroyer had its main gun destroyed, so the crew installed 2 smaller weapons from a damaged fighter in its place. They're not following any engineering standards we know, Thylak said in amazement. They're just making it work. 3. Systems away, the Corvin Central Hive was experiencing something unprecedented: individual thoughts. The hive mind had always prided itself on perfect unity of purpose. Every Corvin thought the same thoughts, shared the same goals, and acted in perfect coordination. But watching humans fight was causing something the Corvin had never experienced before: curiosity about individual action. The footage showed human pilots making split-second decisions that couldn't have been coordinated with any central command. Each ship seemed to be acting independently, yet somehow they all worked together. It was chaos that created order, and the Corvin couldn't understand how it was possible. Study these humans. The central consciousness commanded its drones. Learn how individual action can create collective strength. For the first time in their species' history, some Corvin began to have their own opinions. On the peaceful trading world of Sanctuary, the Thrix merchant families watched the war with growing concern. The Thrix had built their civilization on trade and mutual cooperation. They had no armies, no weapons of war. They survived by being useful to everyone and threatening no one. Merchant Captain Zalara watched footage of human refugee ships fleeing the latest hegemony attack. But these weren't normal refugees. The humans were using their evacuation ships to relocate entire manufacturing facilities. They were turning their retreat into an expansion. Look at this, Zalara's daughter Kess pointed to the displays. They're not just running away. They're spreading out, making themselves harder to destroy. And they're offering to share their technology, Zalara observed. Not selling it, sharing it, with anyone willing to help defend refugee worlds. The Thrix had never seen anything like it. Most species guarded their technology jealously, but humans seemed to believe that making their allies stronger made humanity safer. Mother, Kess said quietly, what if they win? Zalara considered this. A galaxy where cooperation was valued over conquest, where trade was based on mutual benefit rather than exploitation. Then perhaps, she said slowly, the galaxy becomes a place worth living in. Meanwhile, the war itself was escalating beyond all predictions. Admiral Kravex's cautious approach had been overruled by Hegemony High Command. Supreme War Leader Drakthul had taken personal command of the campaign. The hegemony has never failed. To conquer a species, Drakthul announced to his assembled fleet commanders, we will not let a handful of primitive mammals break that record. Drakthul was old-school hegemony. He believed in overwhelming force and absolute victory. He assembled the largest fleet in hegemony history, 1,500 capital ships, supported by thousands of fighters and support vessels. The humans met this armada with a fleet that looked like it had been assembled in a junkyard. Converted cargo ships flew alongside purpose-built warships. Mining platforms had been turned into mobile fortresses. Even passenger liners had been armed and armored. The Battle of the Iron Nebula became legend throughout the galaxy. Not because of its size. The hegemony had fought larger engagements before, but because of how it was fought. The humans didn't try to match the hegemony fleet ship for ship. Instead, they did something no military strategist had ever considered. They treated the entire nebula as a weapon. Using modified mining charges, they destabilized the nebula's internal structure. The resulting chain reaction created a maze of energy storms and gravitational anomalies that made conventional tactics impossible. Hegemony ships designed for open space combat found themselves trapped in an environment that changed by the minute. Human ships, many of them built from mining and construction equipment, thrived in the chaos. They had been designed to work in dangerous, unpredictable environments. While hegemony vessels struggled with the nebula's hazards, human crews treated them as just another engineering challenge. The battle lasted for 3 days. When it ended, Drakthul's mighty fleet had been scattered across 7 star systems. Not destroyed, the humans seemed remarkably reluctant to kill their enemies, but disabled and demoralized. More importantly, the humans had captured enough hegemony technology to accelerate their development by decades. Within weeks, human shipyards were producing vessels that incorporated the best of both technologies. But the real change wasn't in technology, it was in the galaxy's perception of the war. Elder Vexhai received visitors for the first time in centuries. Delegates from dozens of species came to Zarian Prime, all asking the same question. What did you know about the humans that we didn't? I tried to warn you, Vexhai replied to each delegation. They are not like us. They do not accept defeat. They do not acknowledge impossible odds. When faced with a superior enemy, they do not surrender. They adapt. Ambassador Thylan, now recalled from active duty, stood before the Galactic Council once again. But this time, he wasn't reporting a simple conquest. The humans have done something unprecedented, he told the assembled representatives. They're not just fighting the hegemony, they're changing how war itself is fought. They've proven that technological superiority doesn't guarantee victory, that individual creativity can overcome collective strength. That hope is more powerful than fear. The Zalani delegation was the first to speak. We wish to establish formal diplomatic relations with the Terran Federation. As do we, added the Corvan representative, speaking as an individual for the first time in their species' history. One by one, species that had remained neutral began to choose sides, but they weren't choosing between the hegemony and humanity. They were choosing between the old galaxy and a new one. The Thrix were the first to openly defy hegemony expansion, using their trade networks to supply human allies. The Zalani began, sharing their engineering expertise with human shipbuilders. The Corvan, inspired by human individualism, started developing their own versions of human tactics. On Earth, President Martinez addressed not just humanity, but the galaxy itself. We didn't start this war, she said. We didn't want this war. But since it was forced upon us, we're going to finish it. Not through conquest or domination, but by proving that there's a better way for civilizations to interact. The broadcast was transmitted to every inhabited system in the galaxy. For the first time, beings across known space heard a leader talking about cooperation instead of conquest, about mutual benefit instead of exploitation. Supreme War Leader Drakthul watched the broadcast from his rebuilt flagship. Around him, his staff waited for orders. The war was going badly, not just the military campaign but the political one. Hegemony subject species were beginning to rebel, inspired by human example. Sir, his intelligence chief reported, 17 systems have declared independence in the last month. They're requesting human protection. Drakthul stared at the tactical display. Red markers showed hegemony losses. Blue markers showed human positions. But there were new colors now. Green for independent systems, yellow for species that had switched sides, and purple for worlds that had simply declared neutrality and started trading with both sides. The galaxy was changing, and the hegemony was being left behind. What are your orders, sir? His aide asked. Drakthul was silent for a long moment. He had been bred for war, trained for conquest. But this wasn't a war anymore, it was something entirely new. The humans weren't trying to destroy the hegemony. They were trying to make it irrelevant, and they were succeeding. Prepare a communication to Earth, he said finally. It's time to discuss terms. His staff stared at him in shock. The hegemony had never negotiated with an enemy before. They had never needed to. But as Elder Vexhai had warned, humans were not like any enemy they had ever faced. They were something far more dangerous than conquerors. They were revolutionaries. The Great Hall on Xerion Prime looked different than it had 3 years ago. The same representatives were there, most of them anyway, but everything had changed. Where once there had been clear hierarchies and established power structures, now there was something that looked almost like chaos. Elder Vexhai stood at the center platform once again, but this time she was not alone. Captain Sarah Chen stood beside her, wearing the simple blue uniform of the Terran Federation. Around them, delegates from over 200 species filled the hall, not just the traditional council members, but representatives from worlds that had never had a voice before. 3 years ago, Vexhai began, I warned you about humanity. I told you they were unstoppable. I told you they would change everything. She paused, her crystal form reflecting the light from 3 suns. I was wrong about one thing. I said, no one heeded the warnings. That wasn't entirely true. Some of you listened. Some of you chose to stand with them instead of against them. Counselor Drex of the Hegemony, former Supreme War Leader Drakthul's replacement, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The Hegemony delegation was much smaller than it had been 3 years ago. 47 of their subject worlds had declared independence. Many others had simply stopped paying tribute and started governing themselves. We are here, Drex said, formally to discuss terms of coexistence. Captain Chen stepped forward. We prefer the word cooperation, she said with the same friendly smile she had worn during first contact. Coexistence sounds like we're just trying to avoid fighting each other. We'd rather work together. Work together toward what? Asked Counselor Thylix of the Zalani. The engineer had become one of humanity's strongest supporters after seeing what they could accomplish when species shared knowledge freely. Toward making the galaxy a place where everyone has a chance to grow, learn and prosper, Chen replied. Where conflicts are resolved through discussion instead of warfare. Where technology and knowledge are shared instead of hoarded. Where the strong protect the weak instead of exploiting them. Laughter rippled through parts of the hall, but it was nervous laughter. 3 years ago, such words would have been dismissed as naive idealism. Now, with 200 species already living under those principles, it sounded like a reasonable plan. Ambassador Thylan stood up. His time with humans had changed him in ways he was still discovering. Captain Chen, you speak of protection for the weak. But what happens when the strong refuse to cooperate? When they choose conquest over cooperation? Chen's smile became harder, more determined. Then they discover that we're very good at protecting our friends, and that our definition of friends includes anyone who shares our values. The tactical displays around the hall showed the current state of the galaxy. The Terran Federation controlled relatively few worlds directly, but their influence extended far beyond their borders. Trade routes protected by human fleets, independent worlds defended by mixed species task forces, research stations where dozens of species worked together on projects that would have been impossible alone. You have accomplished something remarkable, admitted Counselor Vera of the Meditation Worlds. You have created an alliance based on choice rather than force. But how do you maintain unity without central control? How do you prevent conflict between such diverse species? Dr. Marcus Webb, now Director of Xenocultural Affairs for the Federation, answered that one. The same way we've always solved problems. We figure it out as we go. When conflicts arise, we talk about them. When someone has a better idea, we try it. When something doesn't work, we fix it. But what about oversight? Regulation? Control? Pressed Counselor Jara of the Trading. Guilds? We've found that most problems sort themselves out if you let people work together, Chen replied. When the Corvin started developing individual consciousness, we didn't try to control it. We helped them figure out how to balance individual thought with collective action. When the Thrix wanted to establish new trade routes, we provided security instead of demanding tribute. When the Zalani wanted to share their engineering knowledge, we made sure everyone who wanted to learn had access to it. Elder Vexhai watched the discussion with something that might have been satisfaction. Tell them about the Frontier Project, she suggested. Chen's smile returned to its original warmth. That's our biggest announcement today. The Federation is launching an exploration initiative beyond the Galactic Rim. We're looking for new worlds, new species, new possibilities. Anyone who wants to join us is welcome." The hall erupted in excited chatter. Exploration beyond the galaxy had been theoretical for centuries. Most species were too focused on controlling what they already knew to consider venturing into the complete unknown. "But why?" asked Counselor Tybex of the Crystal Worlds. "Why risk the unknown when there's still so much to accomplish in known space?" "Because that's what humans do," Vexai said softly. "They explore, they discover, they keep moving forward, and now they're taking the rest of us with them." The formal session continued for hours, but the real negotiations happened in smaller groups throughout the day. Species that had been enemies for millennia found themselves discussing joint research projects. Former hegemony worlds talked about establishing their own defensive alliances. Even traditional rivals began exploring possibilities for cooperation. Supreme War Leader Drakthul, now calling himself Administrator Drakthul, approached Captain Chen during a break in the proceedings. "I must ask," he said quietly, "what would have happened if we had accepted your original offer of cooperation? If we had chosen trade and cultural exchange instead of war?" Chen considered the question seriously. "We probably would have learned a lot from each other a lot faster. Your military engineering is impressive. We could have used those innovations for exploration and construction instead of weapons. Your organizational skills could have helped us coordinate our expansion more efficiently. And the war, the destruction, could have been avoided entirely," Chen said sadly. "We never wanted to fight you. We just wanted to explore and learn. But when you threatened our people..." She shrugged. "We do what we have to do to protect our friends." Drakthul nodded slowly. "I am beginning to understand why Elder Vexai was so concerned. You are indeed unstoppable, but perhaps that is not the disaster I once thought it would be." As the day wore on, the shape of the new galaxy became clearer. The old council would continue to exist, but as one governing body among many. The Federation would continue to grow, but through invitation rather than conquest. Independent worlds would remain independent, but within a network of mutual support and protection. Most importantly, the conversation had shifted from who controls what to how can we work together. In the evening, as delegates prepared to return to their home worlds, Elder Vexai found herself alone with Captain Chen on one of Zerion Prime's observation decks. "You know," the ancient being said, "I've been alive for longer than most civilizations have existed. I've seen empires rise and fall, species evolve and go extinct, technologies advance and become obsolete. But I've never seen anything like what your species has accomplished." "We couldn't have done it alone," Chen replied. "Every species that joined us brought something unique. The Zelani's engineering, the Corvin's coordination abilities, the Thrix's trading networks. We just provided a framework for cooperation." "No," Vexai said firmly. "You provided something much more important than that. You provided hope. The idea that things could be better. That the old ways weren't the only ways, that the future could be different from the past." They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars. Finally, Chen spoke again. "You said we were unstoppable, but you never said we were unguided. We've learned a lot from you, Elder Vexai, from all of you. We're not the same species that stumbled into space 3 years ago." "No," Vexai agreed. "You're something better. You're what humans become when they have the whole galaxy to explore." A soft chime indicated an incoming message. Chen checked her communicator and smiled. "The first Frontier Project ships are ready to launch. The crew is mixed species, humans, Zelani, Corvin, even some reformed hegemony officers. They'll be carrying hopes and dreams from 200 different worlds." "And what do you hope they'll find out there?" Vexai asked. Chen's smile became the same expression she had worn during first contact, excited, optimistic, and completely unafraid of the unknown. "Everything," she said simply. "We hope they find everything." As the first ships of the Frontier Project departed for the Galactic Rim, carrying crews from dozens of species into the infinite unknown, Elder Vexai reflected on her long life. She had seen the rise and fall of countless civilizations. She had witnessed wonders and horrors beyond imagination, but she had never seen anything as dangerous or as hopeful as a species that believed anything was possible. The humans were indeed unstoppable, but perhaps, she thought, as she watched, their ships disappear into the darkness between galaxies. That was exactly what the universe needed. After all, someone had to keep pushing forward into the unknown. Someone had to believe that tomorrow could be better than today. And if that someone happened to be an unstoppable species of optimistic primates who thought impossible was just another word for challenging, well,